Okay, so PvP basics for Guild Wars 2 is really reliant on four roles in the game, and those roles are roamer, side node, team fight, and support. And these sort of form the backbone of the team composition. So a side node wins duels, survives 2v1s, and can safely escape from 3. What it means by survive 2v1s is that it can just sort of stall. Um, Usually not indefinitely, because that would be overpowered, of course, but the side node is attempting to waste the time of two people and win a 1v1. And side noders right now, you'll see people like Soul Beast, Bladesworn, most forms of warrior are like really archetypical side nodes who really want duels and are really good at surviving. Next role we have is roamer, and the roamer's job is to be really mobile around the map, create numbers advantages in certain fights, decap points that are not being supervised by the enemy, split up the enemy by attacking people in roads, and roads are just the areas of the map that are between the nodes. So if you're in roads, that just means that you're like on your way from home towards mid, or you're on your way from point A to point B. And the roamer is also going to be one doing most of the cap work. Uh, Say that you're in mid fight. Every single game usually starts with like a team fight at mid, and say that you win that fight, the roamer is going to be the one who stays behind and caps that point, while the team fight and the support push on to try to gain more territory. So, and then that brings us to. Oh, wait. I should mention roamers are usually going to be like your thief, your revenant, scrapper. Anyone with stealth is usually a pretty good roamer. Roamers do get pretty deep into enemy territory, so they want to be able to have that stealth so that they can get away. Alright, so team fight. Team fight, their only goal is to deal as much damage as possible to the enemy without dying. The team fight works as a unit with the support. Usually they're going to be together. If they separate, it's usually because the support is like just saving their own skin after the team fight goes down. Well, it's not the most ideal situation. So in general, the team fight is going to be sticking really tightly with the support. The team fight is typically stuff like Necromancer, even stuff like Dragon Hunter, and of course, not every class is going to fit perfectly into one role. For example, Willbender has a lot of AoE damage, but also moves really quickly around the map, so they can also be considered sort of a roamer. In general, team fights are the ones who are also cleaving the downs and claiming territory. What that means is if you are in sort of a neutral game state, there's not a lot of fights going on. Your team fight is the one who is pushing into enemy territory to try to cap a node. Often the roamer is going to be the one decapping, but the team fight and the support are going to be the ones capping. And then support's super simple. The support's main job is to keep their whole team alive, but mostly their team fight. The support is going to be most concerned that their team fight is well fed and surviving and thriving. The support usually takes a resurrection utility, and by that I mean like Signet Res. You can see that on guard. That's like the default resurrection utility. Their goal is also to stomp with stability and revive. Also usually with stability, and other utility. And what that means is stuff like reflects, auras from Tempest, boons from Guard, stuff of that nature. And for support, you're mostly going to be just looking at Guard and Elementalist. Personally, I'm an advocate of tablet support, but if you're like sort of new to the support role, that's definitely not something that you want to be playing. So a traditional team composition is going to be 2 side nodes, 1 support, one team fight and one roamer. All right. Side nodes are going to keep the points locked down. That means that they're going to be on home and on far. And generally, they're going to be the ones that have the most defense at the end of the game. So I know, like, top stats, defense, offense, etc. The side node is going to get the most defense because they're going to be fighting on points a lot. They're either going to be fighting on neutral points or they're going to be fighting on their points. Side node typically does not want to be the one decapping because side node doesn't usually have a lot of tools in its kit to quickly win fights. They have a lot of survivability, but usually not a ton of burst. So in general, a side node is going to try to prevent a point from being capped, or they're going to attempt to cap the point. And if they do end up on an enemy point, sometimes they'll want to stand that point, but usually they're just going to bail. Your teamfight support is going to live on mid. Your teamfight support duo will advance on points to get them decapped so that your side node can stay on there and either waste time or cap the point. But in general, they're going to be hovering around mid so that they have the most access to the map. And again, the teamfight support is going to generally stay together. The roamer is going to be all over the place. They're going to be far, home, whatever. They're going to be deep in enemy territory, decapping enemy points. They're going to be mid, helping out the team fight if there's nothing else to do. They're going to be on far, plussing their side node so that they can win a 1v1. It's really all over the place. So in general, what the map state's going to look like is you're going to have one side node, far/mid, and the other one's going to be mid/home. What that means is your side node is going to abandon their side node if there's like a team fight or something going on mid, or if they lose the point, whatever, they're going to join up with this core team fight/support group. Usually that's going to be the mid/home side node is going to be joining the main group because once you cap home, there's not a whole lot of sense in just sitting on it. And sometimes they'll need to, the far/mid one will need to come mid if they lose the far node. But in general, both of them are going to stick to their respective points. When your side node is in a 1v1, the roamer is going to attempt to plus that 1v1 to make it a 2v1. Just so that the side node can relieve some pressure there, get some kills, and stagger the enemy. So, really commonly, one of the questions that I get asked is what to do when the enemy groups up as 5 people and just decides to start steamrolling something. If they group up on far, your far, their home, that means that your side node just has to disengage, give up the point. It's whatever. Your roamer will decap the point later. It's fine. If you are a side node and you see 5 people coming for you and you're alone, you do not want to get steamrolled. So just give up the point, go mid, join your team fight, and prep for a 5v5 on mid. If they're grouping up as 5 on mid, this really depends on your team composition. So if your team is stronger in a team fight, if your side noders are better in a team fight, if your roamer has a lot of AoE damage, stuff like that, then go ahead and take the 5v5. If you make that assessment and you decide, no, we've already tried this, we do lose this 5v5, or something like that, then you're going to retreat and take your core team fight and support and your home side node and send them all home. And you're going to take your side node and roamer and take them far. Your goal here is to split up the enemy team. Ideally, what they're going to do is send like a couple people to far to deal with your side noder and roamer, and then just a couple people are going to stay behind mid. But regardless, someone has to stay mid on the enemy team in order to cap the point. So you don't need to worry about them rushing home as 5 at that point. If they're rushing home as 5, then the roamer It's their time to shine. They have to decap mid and then full cap far. The reason to do that is because mid is too close to home, so if they just try to full cap mid, then they're going to get steamrolled. So they just neutralize home, they just neutralize mid, and then they go full cap far. And then they go back to full cap mid. You try your best to delay them at home. You're not going to fight at node. You are going to give up the point. You're going to sit in roads. You're just going to try not to die as best as you can. And that's because dying is sort of like the worst thing that you can do. And we'll discuss that in just one moment. So in terms of non-traditional team comps, generally you still want to be sticking with your roles function. So if you're playing as a roamer, you still want to roam. Playing as a side node, you still want a side node. Playing as a support, you still want to support. Because these roles are really flexible in terms of the situations that you can drop them in. A side noder is going to be following like a side noder archetype of playing. It's not necessary that they have this whole team built up around them, if that makes any sense. A side noder without a team is still a side noder. They're still playing like a side noder. And that is to say that your team comp doesn't dictate your job. Your job is dictated by what you're playing and what your class is good at. So if you're playing a warrior, that means that you're a side node. Usually. I mean, there's some support warriors, there's some teamfight warriors. But if you're a warrior, you're usually a side node. And that means that you want to play like a side node. And that's because if you do not play like a side node, then nobody on your team is going to play like a side node. You are doing someone else's job, and you are going to do it poorly because your class doesn't have all the tools to do that. Don't be a hero. Please. Dying is the very worst thing that you can do in SPVP. It is always bad if you die. Sometimes your team fight or your support's gonna die. It sucks, but team fight and support don't really have a lot of mobility. They don't have like a lot of disengage tools. So if you like straight up lose a 5v5, c'est la vie, your team fight's gonna die. And that's true in like, even if you get up to like professional play where you're dealing with like Plat 3 versus Plat 3 teams, your team fight's occasionally gonna die. It's okay. Your roamer and your side node do not have an excuse for dying unless the enemy team is really, really screwing up. And what I mean by that is like your side node is getting 5v1'd and they're trying to corner your side node off node or something. That's the only situation in which a side node is going to die. And in that case, it's like, that sucks, but you're gaining a lot of material advantage for dying. But generally speaking, if both teams are playing optimally, your roamer and side node will have no excuse for dying. They're going to have mobility for getting around the map. They're going to have disengage tools. They're going to have invulnerability, a lot of regen. They're going to be tanky. Well, the side node is, the roamer's not. An example is if you are playing Thief and you go to decap a node and the enemy warrior comes to your node. It does not matter if you think that you can win that 1v1. You need to respect your opponent and play as though they are as skilled as you are. So you just leave. Even if you haven't decapped the full node yet, you do not want to die to the warrior. So you go in the stealth, you just bail. It's super easy for a thief to do. You don't want to overcommit to fights, and you don't want to overestimate your own survivability. So if your team fight goes down and your team fight fully dies, and you've still got like a 5v4 going, just leave the 5v4. You're gonna want to make some space for yourself to regroup. So you're gonna rotate towards home, or you're gonna rotate towards your support and team fight. If you are a side node or a roamer and you get outnumbered, just start running towards your support and team fight. Those guys are going to help you out. Make sure that it's known on comms, if you are in comms, that you have multiple people on you, and your support and team fight should rotate towards you as well to assist in that fight. You never want to fight outnumbered. In very rare situations, as a side noter, you will want to fight 2v1 or 3v2 because you have the survivability in your kit to troll that fight and to extend it and make them overcommit resources to deal with you. But generally speaking, if you see like 3 people and you're just 1 person, just go away. It's not worth it to die on node. You can recap that node. I think it's 15, 20 seconds. I think it's 15 by default. The 15 seconds that you're completely taken out of the game, you're put at one side of the map, is very bad for your team. So you never want to do that. If you are your team fight / support and you're outnumbered, say that you're in like a 3v2 situation or you're in a 4v3 situation, you're going to go towards home. If you're the team fight support and you're outnumbered at home, that really sucks. And I understand that it's like, oh, I'm going to die for no reason. Just stay off node, try to survive the best that you can. Your roamer and side node are going to shine in this situation because this is where your roamer and side node should be rotating towards mid, towards far, and winning the map while they're overcommitting resources to far, or to your home. So I just have a couple of mantras to repeat during your games, things to tell yourself. This is mostly aimed towards solo queue players, but it also applies to any sort of SPVP situation like tourneys, in-house 5v5, stuff like that. So number 1, if I try to do someone else's job, nobody else will do my job. Number 2, if I do my job and I lose, that's okay. Because you know that you did all that you can do. Mechanical improvement will come in with practice. You want to be strategically correct, but mechanically correct will come with just playing the game as much as you can. I can't always carry, but I can always carry more. There are some games where you're like, oh, that was completely unwinnable. There was nothing that I could do to win that game. Maybe that's true, but there's definitely something that you could have done during that game to even the odds a little bit. Everyone tilts, but not everybody plays tilted. It's okay to be angry after you lose a game or mad with yourself or frustrated with yourself. That's fine. That's totally natural. What can set you apart from other people is just taking a break, grabbing like a glass of water, and taking a moment to decompress before the next game. Blame is a manifestation of guilt. I will reflect and accept. That just means if you're blaming other people for losing the game, that's sort of an indicator that you feel like it's necessary to blame someone else. Blame is always sort of a deflection. It's always sort of saying, well, it's not because of me, because this person was doing something. It's never necessary to blame. You can reflect on what you did in that game, and either you will come to the realization that you could have done something better, or you will accept that the game went as it was, and that's okay. So that's my whole presentation. That's my whole shtick out of the way. I absolutely believe that the average person, if you just take this super basic advice and apply it in your games, you can absolutely get to plat. You can absolutely get to gold 3 or even higher. So if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask right now. But otherwise, we can start segueing into getting some matches going. I'm going to also unmute Starlight here. There we go. Starlight, you all right? You had some mic bleed. You had some mic bleed earlier, so I had to mute you on my end.
Oh shoot! I didn't realize I was unmuted. My apologies.
No worries. It's fine. I was just really confused. I was like, "Are you talking to me?"
Oh shoot! I thought I had self-muted. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Does anybody have any questions about this? Alright, I take your dumbfounded silence as a no. So we will go ahead and wrap up this recording. I'll probably cut it to make it flow just a little bit better. And I will...
do have one question. How do you know which class fits which role?
Yeah, so as I said, it's not super clean division. So for example, if you look at a class like Willbender, Willbender has some aspects that would make you think that it's a team fight. For example, it has a lot of AoE damage, and it's able to deal with like multiple people really well. But it also has a lot of aspects that would make you think that it's a roamer. So, for example, it is super fast. It has a lot of dashes and stability and ways to extricate itself from bad situations. So, ultimately, Willbender can be played in both ways. And in those situations, you sort of want to apply both roamer and team fight to it, where it's like, I want to stick with my support, but also if I see an opportunity to help out my side noder, then I can take that opportunity. I can seize the day. So ultimately, these are guides for playstyle. If you decide, okay, in this game, I think that it's best if I behave as a roamer, then you want to be a roamer. If you realize, oh, we don't have like that much damage from our team fight, I think that this game it would be better if I play like a team fight, then you should play as a team fight. You should rotate with your support. You should push into enemy territory with your support. So it's really up to how you need to play the game. But at the start of the game, you should be thinking, before the game even starts, you should be thinking, these are the needs of my team. This is the role that I need to be for my team, and you should be playing that way.
Aaron.
Otherwise, I could like just really quickly go over what traditionally each role is thought of. So warrior is almost always going to be a side node. Guardian can be support or roamer or team fight. Honestly, Dragon Hunter can also be side nodes, so it can kind of be everything. Revenant is usually going to be roamer. Engineer, Scrapper is usually going to be roamer. Hollowsmith can be side node, but is typically more of a roamer. Thief is 100% of the time a roamer. Ranger can be a side node or a roamer. Side node is Soul Beast, roamer is going to be Untamed. Elementalist can be support or side node. Catalyst is going to be side node. You get some weird like Weaver roamers, but not as often anymore, so I wouldn't worry about that. And of course, Tempest is going to be support. You can also play Tempest as a team fight, but that's not recommended particularly. Mesmer is usually going to be a roamer. They can be side node with Chrono Tank, and they can also be side node with Condi Virtuoso if it's played well. And lastly, Necromancer is usually going to be team fight. It's pretty rare for Necromancer to be anything but a team fight. All right. If there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Again, I'll chop it up a little later and post it in PvP chat, so if there's anything that you missed, you can feel free to catch it later there.